Hey, do you have a book inside you? I'm guessing that if you're watching, you do. And I know what that feels like. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I think you're here because it's time for you to write that book. I think that's what brought you here. Maybe it's not even your first book. Maybe you've written one before, but this time you're stumped. Maybe you have 5 half-written drafts on your hard drive and just can't finish one. Whatever it is, I want you to get to that last page of a full draft. And today I'm going to show you how to finally get your book written. Let's go. First, I have to tell you a story about how I wound up being a novelist, which I honestly never in a million years thought I would actually pull off. 11 years ago, I was a very new, very unhappy lawyer. I was unhappy because, well, a few reasons, but one was I had no time to write. And I'd been dying to be an author since I was 12, and my 7th grade English teacher, Miss Chansey, taught me how to write a sonnet. So I quit my job to have time to write. And nothing about quitting was a smart financial move. I still had 6 figures of student loan debt. I had a bunch of credit card debt from all the excess spending I'd been doing, trying to fill the hole in my soul. But I found a tutoring job on Craigslist. I broke my lease to move to a cheaper apartment, and then the real work began. I was going to write a book. I just didn't know where to start. So I signed up for writing classes. I took classes in everything from how to write beautiful sentences to how to structure a novel to how to write a novel without structure. And while some of these were great, the fact that most of them were based on feedback from my peers often left me feeling more in the dark, not less. I was hungry for instruction because I knew I was a novice. I knew I didn't know what I was doing. So I would listen to anything anyone told me, from books on craft to people I hired to peers in my classes, just anyone I thought was smart. I would take their advice to heart. Whether it was striking all of my adverbs or changing my entire style of writing. I would rewrite my work to suit anybody I was trying to please at the moment. Whether it was an agent I was pitching or my writing teacher or my friend. And because it meant I was catering to their visions and not my own, I would lose motivation, my writing would fall flat, and I would feel like a failure. And this cycle left me aimless and full of self-doubt. So 5 years after quitting my job to write, I was still writing the same book over and over based on feedback from other people. Now, one afternoon, I was sitting on my couch in an online writing course, and I was listening as the instructor, who was a very highly accomplished editor, explained how I should turn my really kind of weird novel into a more traditional narrative. And somehow this was a moment of realization for me. Only I knew what this thing was. No one else could tell me. No one else could do it for me. I knew I didn't want to write what she was describing, but she didn't know what I wanted to write because she wasn't in my head. I had to give myself permission to just write the thing that I wanted to write. I had to trust my own taste, and I was going to have to be more courageous. So I dropped out of that class. I rewrote the book one last time. And that was the book that sold at auction in the US and all over the world and became my first novel, launching my career as an author. I'd learned from that experience that I needed to trust my own vision over other people's feedback. And that was a really important lesson for me to learn. The thing was, I still didn't actually have a process for writing a book. I'd just kind of written it and rewritten it until I finally landed on a good draft. It was far from efficient, I assure you, because it took me about 6 years. Well, then, flash forward, I sold my next novel to my publisher based on a proposal, meaning just an outline of it and a couple of sample chapters. After you publish your first book, you can often do this. You can often sell your next one based on a proposal, even if it's fiction. It's pretty great. This time, I had a full-time job, which I had taken to get healthcare so I could have a baby. And I'd had a baby. So I didn't have the luxury of sitting and staring at a computer screen for hours and hours a day, waiting for inspiration to strike. I really had no choice but to come up with a more efficient process for writing a novel. I decided I was going to write this thing during my maternity leave. So that was going to give me about 8 weeks and I could manage about 2 hours a day that I could write between nursing my baby and childcare and all of that stuff. So I did it. I found a process for writing a novel that I could work into about 2 hours a day over 8 weeks. And when I finished that draft, I felt really great, not just because I had finished it, but because I had discovered a process that could work in a busy life. After some time passed, I decided I wanted to teach this process to other people and save them the time and energy that, I'd learned to save myself. So I learned from writing my first novel not to write based on feedback, and I learned from writing my second novel what to do instead. So I created an online coaching business to teach aspiring authors how to do just that. Over the past couple of years, I've helped many writers write their dream books. And it makes me so happy. It's really, really fulfilling work. Now, here are just a few of them. I want you to be able to hear from authors who have also used this process. This is Fiona. Fiona had been writing for years, but couldn't finish her first book. She says, I was making very slow progress on my draft and thinking too much about querying agents while I was still drafting. The Incubator gave me the support I needed to finish. A lot of programs have an overwhelming amount of content, but Mary makes sure she's only giving us valuable lessons and not cutting into our precious writing time. The Incubator was the best investment ever. Now this is Graham. Graham had a bunch of half drafts in drawers when we started working together. Graham says, for years, I tried many different times to write a novel, but I could never seem to finish anything. Mary gave me the tools I needed to finally get the job done. I completed my first draft in 5 months, which is pretty incredible considering my previous attempt took over 3 years and I still never made it to the end. I couldn't have done this without Mary's guidance and support. If you're serious about finishing your novel, working with her is the smartest investment you'll ever make. Okay, just a couple more. Here's Chris. Chris had an MFA and wrote short stories, but didn't know how to write a novel when we started working together. She says, it's hard to justify spending more money on a writing program when one already has an MFA. I value my MFA, but you are giving me something my MFA did not, which is guided method to completing a long-form narrative. Your system has freed me up to find both the truth and honesty in fiction, and it has awakened my maker side. I am loving the work that I'm doing. And then there's Pushpa, a doctor with 2 little girls at home who wrote her novel on her phone notes app in between patients. Pushpa says, it's been years since I felt it was reasonable to even call myself a latent writer. Mary offers concrete guidance and structure without being prescriptive, and the short, digestible learning bursts are high yield and fit into a busy life. Writing isn't easy to come back to, but there's something about Mary's approach that has reopened and reconnected me to creativity I honestly wasn't sure was still there. Okay, so I could share more stories with you, but I'm just gonna leave it there for now. If you have a book inside you, I wanna help you. If you're curious to know more about the Book Incubator, I have a free video walking you through my exact process for writing a book, the one I teach in the program. And you can get it by clicking below and answering 2 questions to apply to the program. You can get the video whether you join or not. There's not pressure to enroll. Just click below to tell me a little bit about you and your book. It's just an online form, okay? I'm so excited to hear from you.